Hello and welcome to Finder Facts. Today's fact, which is the fastest video conferencing software in Australia? We've all been speaking screen to screen rather than face to face over the past few months, and everyone has different opinions on which video conferencing platform is the best. The ACCC has just released its first critical services report, which measures just how well video conferencing services have been performing in a time where we've needed them most. Finder's editor-in-chief Angus joins me now over Zoom. Don't judge me. To take us through the data. And Angus, what did the ACCC measure and what does that mean exactly?
So the ACCC wanted to look into how well video conferencing services perform, and the key thing you want to measure there is latency, which is basically how much delay you've got between when you say something and when the other person hears it back. Because if you've got high latency, you end up with that familiar sensation where people just pause on screen and then keep going along like that. So that was the key thing they wanted to look at, is what happens when people are using the most popular tools. Are they actually getting a decent service? Which ones are actually the most likely to have a delay in them?
You mentioned latency. What does that mean exactly?
Well, there are a whole bunch of issues, and these measurements are imperfect because every person connected to a call can potentially mess it up. So if you've got one person on a slow connection and everyone else is fast, it's still going to be a bit of an issue. The single biggest factor apart from that is where the servers you're connected to are actually located. So if the service you're using has servers in Australia, you'll typically get lower latency and better performance than if there are servers overseas, because all that data is just having to travel that much further if it's going to Singapore or the US, if it's only having to go within Sydney or going from Sydney to Perth or something like that. So definitely the closer you are to the server, the better latency is going to be. But you can't really control which server you're connected to. So even in Australia, you might end up connected to an overseas server. It's a little bit of a throw of the dice in that respect.
All right, Angus, moment of truth. Which one did the best?
So the service that came out on top of this, a little surprisingly, I will admit, was actually Skype. It had the lowest latency overall, closely followed by Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. Then you had GoToMeeting, then Zoom, then WebEx, which actually had the worst latency figures. Now, the WebEx latency was around 300 milliseconds, which isn't unusable. So all of these services are okay. None of them were actually cracking under the stress, but there was a big distinction there between the three fast ones and the three slow ones. And the ACCC says that is mostly down to where the servers are located.
Looking at the data, they also measured performance by state and time of day as well. Is there anything of note there?
One of the interesting things was, it didn't really matter what time of day you were connecting up. Most of these services had a pretty similar performance throughout the day. It also didn't make much difference which NBN plan you're on, whether you're on a 50 or 100. And that comes down to the fact that you're only one person contributing to the call. The one thing that was evident with some services, you would see differences between states. So for instance, in Western Australia, the performance was not as good for Teams or for Google Meetings as there have been other ones. And that's likely to be because even though there are servers in Australia, the servers are on the East Coast. And if you're on the West Coast, there's still a decent distance to travel. In fact, people in Perth tend to get a better service from things that are coming out of Singapore because they're actually closer and connected by better cables than they would be to some parts of Eastern Australia.
What can people do to help make these services run faster on their end, like upgrading their broadband or something like that?
I would not be picking a service just based on this survey because it is only one group of customers and we don't know how many people they were connecting. The experience of any of these things is very different when you've got a call for 40 people versus a call for 4. So I wouldn't be picking a best solely based on this performance. What I would say is if you're using one of these services and you're really finding the performance isn't great, that's the time to start looking at other things because changing service can make a difference. So most of these have a free trial. So if you're not happy with one, try out something different, look around and compare, because that's what I think we can learn from this, that there are noticeable performance differences. And if you're having those issues, it's definitely something to think about.
Thanks, Angus. That's the facts for today. Make sure to comment below. Tell us what you think the best video conferencing app is, and someone will also probably tell you you're wrong. That's how the internet works. And if you're not subscribed already, may I suggest you do so, because we have a whole bunch of new stuff coming out about personal finance, about how to make better decisions in your everyday life. It's going to be a blast. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.